I think every one of us knows someone who's gone through a crisis of faith, perhaps even someone who's no longer a Muslim. I think all of us have had that painful realization one day, oh my God, so-and-so. More and more people question and doubt their faith. Brothers and sisters, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with three primary needs or faculties, if you like. The physical needs, the spiritual needs, and the intellectual needs. We have, number one, physical needs. And so, physical, we need to eat, we need to drink, we need air. Number two, we also have spiritual needs. And these spiritual needs must also be fulfilled. If they are not fulfilled, then what happens? Many things. First and foremost, depression. Secondly, meaninglessness, just living your life carpe diem for the moment. You just feel empty. And then there's an intellectual need as well, that your intellect needs to be satisfied, your curiosity needs to be met. And Islam comes with enough for all three of these things. And it tells you how to live your life physically, it tells you how to live your life spiritually, and it gives you the answers for the meaningful questions. Why am I here? What is the purpose of life? Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create me? Now the problem comes when we take one of these three functions and use them to trump the others, make it the end all and be all. And in particular in our times, it's the issue of rationality. It's the issue of using our intellects or our brain to try to understand even the minutiae of Islam. And if we don't understand it, well then we end up rejecting the entire religion of Islam. Islam does not come with anything that is irrational, but it does come with things that are supra-rational. And it is possible your mind will not fully comprehend, but Islam will never tell you something that goes against, that contradicts the mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you with. And when you look at the questions that these young men and women, and they're almost always young men and women, 17, 18, 19, 20, when they're going through this crisis of faith up to the early 20s, when you look at the questions that these young men and women ask, they inevitably center around a core group of issues, all of which are modern, all of which are emanating from within a particular cultural paradigm. In other words, the questions that people of our generation are asking never even occurred to the last generation, or the generation before them, or the generation before them, all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ and before. These are questions that modern society is positing. Questions about the existence of God, sexuality and orientation, gender roles. These things did not exist. Society, by and large, accepted these things as truths. Instead of just jumping at the Quran and saying, why does the Quran say this? Take a step back before you get there and ask yourself, why am I asking this particular question? We are living and born and raised in a particular context. And the questions that are being spoon-fed to us by the context that we live in, we also should be brave enough to challenge those questions. Why are we not brave enough to challenge those questions, even as we're brave enough to challenge the Quran? Those questions will change. The Quran will remain, as we know, unchanged. Rationality itself changes from society to time to place. And there is nothing that we can judge rationality by in and of itself. In fact, in our own lives, how many times have we undertaken a course of action thinking this is so logical, this is so reasonable, this is so the correct decision. And the next day, the next week, the next month, the next year, we look back and we say, what a dumb decision I made. The Quran never tells you challenge Allah's revelation. If we rely too much on these questions and think that our mind itself will be able to answer it, then we are doomed to fail. Because I will never be able to explain to you every single detail of Islam, right? And we have to realize that we should think about the questions themselves and where they're emanating from, and perhaps the questions themselves are flawed. And I want to give you just one simple example that the right always uses, Islamophobes always use, and they make a very big deal of it. And that is, they say, for example, your Prophet, astaghfirullah, was, and they use a very vulgar word, interested in young people. And I don't want to use the word out of respect for the Prophet, because the age of Aisha was young age. It was 9 years old in the Sahih Bukhari hadith. Okay, she was 9 years old according to Hadith of Bukhari. And so they use a very vulgar word. And I've had young men and women come to me, Muslims, and they say, how can we accept this? This question is emanating from a particular mind, coming from a particular culture, of a particular generation, and a particular time, and a particular place. The worst enemies of the Prophet ﷺ, who smeared him with everything imaginable, they couldn't even think of this as a flaw. Why? Because cultures vary. Practices vary. And it's not just Islamic or Arab culture. The reality is, 500, 1,000 years ago, the world over, people were marrying at younger ages. Why? Because the lifespan was shorter and young kids became mature faster. A 9-year-old of 1400 years ago is like a 16, 17-year-old intellectually and biologically of our times. So when we say 9, we are back projecting our 9-year-old of 2014, Detroit, imagining a 9-year-old girl, and then back projecting that into Medina and saying, oh, how could our Prophet marry somebody that's 9? See, this is a cultural bias. Go do the research. You know the age of Romeo and Juliet in the Shakespeare's play? Romeo and Juliet are supposed to be 14 and 13 years old. Because of his era, 14 and 13 is like our era, 18 and 17. How could our Prophet have done that? SubhanAllah. Who should we blame first? Our own intellect or the seerah of the Prophet? Also realize that, as I said, Islam caters to more than just intellectual questions. Far more profound, Islam caters to our inner core spirituality. The innate subconsciousness that Allah created us upon. We have inside of us some innate subconsciousness, something that Allah put inside every human being. It's called the fitrah. As our Prophet ﷺ said, every child is born upon the fitrah. Every child has this fitrah. What is the fitrah? The fitrah is a source of intuitive knowledge. It's not knowledge that is gained by society, taught to you, spoon-fed to you. You are born knowing certain facts. For example, right from wrong, morality from immorality. And the fitrah also tells us that there is a God and that God is one. So the Muslim does not need to intellectually analyze each and every law in the Quran and Sunnah, because his inner conscience is at ease that Islam is true. Every single question that somebody asks, you could attempt an answer, but some of them are not going to be satisfying. And rather going down this infinite maze and loop and answering every question, take a step back and challenge your own understanding, challenge your own paradigm before you challenge the Quran and the Sunnah. And the last point that I want to say, and my time is up here, is that if you meet such a person who is having some doubts and whatnot, always tell this person, look, there's one thing that we don't lose, me and you, both of us, and that is to sincerely call out to the one who created you, to guide you, and I will do the same. Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. That the power of dua, never underestimated. That if you are in doubt, tell this brother, this sister, if you're really in doubt, then continue to make sincere prayer. And if there is a God, then clearly this God will hear you. And we have a very clear belief in our religion, and that is, whoever wants to be guided will be guided. That if you are sincere, you will come back to the deen, and inshaAllah ta'ala, me and you will be praying together and giving lectures together one day, inshaAllah ta'ala. And if you are not sincere, then every single answer that I give you, you will find loopholes, because for every why, there's a why not. And for every if, there's a but. And for every and, because there's an and. I know the Quran, I hear the Quran, and I know it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I speak this as a hafidh of the Quran, as a believer in the Quran. Wallahi, I hear the Quran, and I know this is a book from Allah. Just the way it moves me, the way the resonance, the sound, the words. And this book cannot be from a human being. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide me and you and all of us to that which He loves and is pleased with. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.